Okay, so now we switch Brett to get a lateral view. So we're really looking for sagittal plane, which is front to back type of discrepancies. And we could start at the feet, or we could start up here, which is where I'm going to start. So the first thing I'm going to look, if I just take a, just get a general view, is just the overall sort of presentation of his body in relation to his feet. Is he more anterior? Go ahead and just lean forward a little bit. You'll see with a lot of people, especially athletes, you'll see a lot of anterior weight shift, where it looks like people are almost ski jumping. I know this is a problem I have as a sprinter. I'm always wanting to go forward. So I want to make note of that. Like, where is the weight borne on his feet? And I might ask him, like, where do you feel the pressure on your feet? And they might not know that, but it's just something to sort of be aware of. From here, I'm really looking at what's going on with the head and the neck. Is the head really poked forward like this? This is a very common position. Now, that's obviously highly exaggerated, but what's going on with the head? How forward of his shoulders is his ear? If it goes way forward, what you're going to see is you're going to see more of a vertical angle here in this muscle here called the SCM, the sternocleidomastoid. So that might be something to look at, is the tone of this muscle here. Also looking at just what's the arch like in his neck. And then coming down, what's going on with his thoracic spine, which starts right here after C7 all the way down. It's normal to have a little bit of a kyphosis. If you didn't really look at the spine, you just saw from here, you might actually think that someone has a pronounced kyphosis, when in fact they might actually have what's called a dorsal disc, or a flat spot in their T-spine. But you wouldn't see it because the scapula might be kind of bulging out, and it looks like that they actually have a normal kyphosis. You're less likely to find that though. You're probably more likely to find an increased kyphosis because of the flexion-based life that we live today, with so much sitting, so much forward, we're looking at phones all day long. So I'm not saying anything really significantly. He does have a bit of an anterior weight shift, but in terms of his T-spine and neck, that looks, pretty normal to me. I'm coming down here, and I'm looking at lumbar next. I'm looking at the lumbar curve. And I have goniometers and fancy tools and things like that to measure it. That's not really what I want to go over in this. I just want to go over, the overall sort of methodology of just looking at posture. So that is something you can definitely get into, but we're not going to be covering that here. So I'm going to have him cross right here, just that hand there to get it out of the way. We could, though, just get a finger over here on the PSIS, one on the ASIS, and just get an idea of overall pelvic tilt. Most guys, they say, might be somewhere between 3 to 7, 5 degrees of pelvic tilt. It all just kind of depends on the literature you read. A female might be more like 8 to 12. You're also going to have some different ethnicities that are going to tend to have a little more pelvic tilt. So that's not necessarily wrong. You're just trying to put it together in context for that person. But you can get an overall idea, right? Like if these were level, if these two fingers were totally level, you'd be like, well, that's more or less zero degrees. He's a little anterior. He lifts a lot of heavy weights. You're not going to find a lot of weight training people that have a posterior pelvic tilt. I'm sure they're out there, but it's not common. Brett, go ahead and put your arms down again. And we can also really look at what's going on with the shoulder again. Is the shoulder internally rotated like this? Or the scapula abducted? Okay, so he's getting stretched here, more internally rotated. Go back to what feels comfortable here. So that looks like a pretty healthy, normal carriage to me there. And then from here, we also want to look at what's going on with the knee. Is it hyperextended, or is one knee maybe a little bit flexed? We'll see that when we have him flip to the other side. And then you can look at the lateral foot as well. So let's go ahead and have you switch directions, Brett. Face this way. This wall here. Okay. And same thing, I usually have them take a couple steps in place just to get comfortable, close their eyes, maybe shrug their shoulders up, and just relax. I don't want them to, have this overwhelming need to have this incredible posture. I just kind of want to see where they're at. And then the same thing. We're just looking to see if there's a discrepancy between what we see on one side of the body, the sagittal plane, and the other side. So we'll be back and we will look at a posterior view. Okay, so we're back, and now we are going to look at a posterior view of Brett here. So same thing, I can start up at the head, and we can look for what's going on here to see if we find this, the same pattern that we found when he was facing forward. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't, which can make it a little more confusing. But again, we can look at the girth of the upper back muscles, the trapeze, a little bit better. We can also see some more rotations and tilts in this position that we couldn't necessarily see when he was facing forward. From here we can go down and we can look at sort of the position of the scapula and its relation to the spine. Like, is one of them more out than the other? Or is there an actual rotation going on in his torso? Sort of a rotoscoliosis. So these are all things that you can see differently when you look at this view. Obviously Brett's got pretty big lats, so it's covering up a lot of the rib tissue, so we can't really see exactly what's going on with the ribs. And we come down here, and just like I did in the front, I want to get in on the sides to see what's going on with the iliac crests. Again, if there's unleveling, it doesn't mean dysfunction. We're just taking note of it. This might not be something that you can even change. Maybe you can a little bit. So I'm coming in here. Actually, well, I'll come in from this side again, actually to make it easier. So I'm coming in first and then down, and we're looking to see if there's an unleveling. Patrick, do you see anything high or low there? I can't really tell from this position.
It looks like your right hand, his left side, looks a little bit lower.
A little bit low, and that's what I found on the anterior view. Okay, so that's consistent. That's good. Thanks, Brett. Then from there, you could come down here and put your thumbs on the PSIX, which is a little harder to find on people, especially if they have a lot of adipose tissue. Brett doesn't have a lot of adipose tissue, but he has very large glutes. So from here, this is what I'm looking for. The easiest way to find it is to sort of stabilize and just take a flat hand and just kind of do like this until you feel it. And then you're looking for an unleveling if one was higher or lower, which, as I mentioned in the side view and in the front view, could be indicative of an anterior or posterior rotation of the ilium, of the pelvis. Which again, we don't know if that's dysfunctional, but it just tells you that there's an unleveling. That's it. And then from the back, we could look at hamstring girth. If there was, if there was a difference, something going on with the contour or the size of the hamstrings, and then the back of the knee. I mean, Brett stands with his legs fairly extended, but that seems to work out right for him. Go ahead and bend one knee. So if you find one like this and one really extended, you'd want to make note of that. It might not be anything significant, but we want to just take note, and then go ahead and just relax. Okay, you can drop those. And then the last thing, we're going to move down to the calf bulk. Kind of compare that, and we can get a really nice view of what's going on with like the navicular bone and the midfoot by looking at the angulation of the Achilles tendon. So from back here, let me back up. They do look fairly vertical. I mean, his navicular bone is a little bit forward, but this isn't anything significant. I want you to purposely try to really flatten your feet for me. You'd see something more like this, where you're going to go into more of like a valgus collapse here. There's going to be an obliteration of that medial longitudinal arch, which could, strain a lot of plantar fascia and stuff. So go ahead and just go back there. Now go ahead and supinate for me, Brett. If you see something like this, you're going to actually see the Achilles kind of flare out. And now he's getting an exaggerated medial arch here, which would be called a cavus foot. So these are all things that you can see very, very well in this view. Thanks, Brett. So what I would do is I would mark all this stuff down on my sheet like I showed earlier, just so you have that. And then you're going to have to combine this information with range of motion testing, functional testing, strength testing. I happen to be fond of the functional movement screen and the SFMA, so those are part of my system. But you don't have to do those systems. You can combine this, but this is just a way where you can look at the whole body and kind of read it. Thomas Myers has some really good postural stuff he calls body reading, I think, in some of his books, so you might want to look at some of that. I know he's got a DVD out, but this is just sort of my version of it. And if you want to practice this with colleagues or friends before you try it on a client, I would highly recommend it. Hope it's been interesting.